Hi, my Copic friends. I am coloring up another image from Ann Corbiere-Scott. This is one of her collections that when you purchase one of her digital art collections, it comes in a full 8.5 by 11 sheet already pre-sized for you. Most of the time there is a standard A2 card front, a slimline card front, and then a kind of a freestanding shape. This particular set is a brand new one that she just released this week, and called Joyce Ann. Each of her collections have a friend's name on them, and several of them have actual frames on the slimline. Here's another one. The slimline and the A2 card front. This one she decided she did light pencil lines that then you would trim off. And the idea was that a lot of people have slightly different sizes they're aiming for, and so this just gives you the general size. You could keep the background, or you could fussy cut and get all of them out of those frames. But this one does not have a hard line frame. I'm actually going to do this slimline skein of yarn, and I played around a little bit yesterday with this idea of kind of doing this multi-tone, that gradient yarn color. So I just felt like that would be really fun to try on this one, and it's actually a lot faster than it looks. Keep it really, really loose. You're going to see if you look really close on this one, there's places where the color overlaps from strand to strand, and I wasn't very careful on that. I don't know that it matters when you're looking at it as a whole. So we're just going to start coloring, and I'll show you kind of what I was doing. For this particular group, I have 4 Copic markers, and these are the 4 that I'm going to be working through the whole time. So I'm not going to keep swapping. So, you know how I post the numbers sometimes up in the corner or down in the corner down here. These are my 4 colors. I've got RV34, B63, V15, and B45, and as always, a colorless blender. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through each of these colors, and I'm doing kind of starting and stopping points. So I'm going to start at one corner where the yarn's coming out of the center of the skein, and then flick it toward the center of that strand, and then I'll bring a different color from the other side inward. To make this go faster, I'm not going to sit and do one strand, one strand, one strand. I'm going to pick a color and lay that down kind of through a bigger section, maybe like 2 sections of the yarn, and then come back with the next color, 3rd and 4th. So accomplishing those 2 all at once, and then kind of working my way down. So that's what I'm thinking. Just because of the size of the image, it will take a little bit longer, but I thought I could show you in detail on a smaller section, and then if it looks like it's taking a little too long, I can speed up on that second half using the same technique. But that way I can kind of talk you through as I go. Let's get a little bit closer, and we're going to start with this end, and I think I'll do those 2 sections, kind of those first 2 gatherings as it spins and tucks in. So I'm going to start, I think this is the order I had them in the other night. The blue kind of works into this other blue. The B45 works into that B63. That kind of transitions into the V15. This is where my, my colorless blender sits, in between the V15 and the RV34. So I think I'll start with the B45 and kind of work my way that way. So as usual, remember you can spin this guy if you need to, but I'm literally coming in and I'm going to give 1 or 2 flicks. They can be different lengths. They do not all need to be the same length. Some of these can be up against each other. Some of these can be spread out. But I want to kind of lay down each color, and it's random, very purposefully random. And I know some of you just heard the magic word that makes you kind of squirm in your seat. This isn't so hard as trying to do dots randomly. To me, sometimes that's really hard to get our hand to work randomly. This is more about, I'm going to scoot over 3 sections. I'm going to go right up against it. I'm going to scoot over 2 sections, come from the same side. So it's not so hard as getting your hand to move in different ways, like with a squiggle or with random dots or lines. Let's see, that looks pretty well balanced. So the next, that was my B45. My next color is a B63. The B6s have quite a bit of violet in them. They have that touch of purple. So a lot of these where I've got that blue halfway, I'm going to start bringing this B63 in from the opposite side. I'll flick it 2 or 3 times, and what happens is that hits the edge of the darker blue, or the B45, and it hits that with more alcohol, and they blend into each other. All right, and then, and I don't need to hit every one, but then I'm going to add more of the B63. I want to have a few places where it then comes in from one half of the other and sits without the blue. And I'm going to try to kind of twist my hand around so you guys can keep it at one view, but you make sure to keep twisting your skein of yarn. All right, filling that in nicely. Next is going to be V15. Now these are going to come in on the halfway spot of my B63 in a few places. You can try it with the blue as well. I love multicolored yarn. I just think it is gorgeous. I always love seeing those rainbows. The beauty of them is I feel like when I look at them, I can't really tell which color leads into another color. And so I feel like with a design like this, or coloring this yarn like this, there's no real right or wrong if you end up with a different color working its way into, like I have a couple places where the violet is coming into the blue instead of the B45 instead of the B63, and I feel like that works. It's just fine. So again, I want to make sure to get a few of these spots that are still left completely white, because I really only have one color left. So I want to make sure to hit several of those so I don't have many spots left. I think I've actually almost got all of them. Okay. And then one more. One last color, and that is the RV34. This is a pretty distinctly different color. So what I'm going to do is some of these spots that now still have half white on a few of them, I'm going to come back in. If it's the violet, I can go ahead and run right up and over the violet, and they'll blend pretty well together. If it's one of the blues, I would try to leave a little bit of a gap, and you can do that on some of the violets as well. And there's a specific reason for that. I'll show you here in just a second. Let's see, we can bring this one part way down. All right. So what I found is the RV didn't play as nicely with the blue. So where it matched up to those, I came in with my colorless blender and went right in between the two colors and softened the edge, because a lot of times in these skeins there even is a little piece of white running through them as well. So I'm gonna actually add that back into my yarn. And what I found with my practice run was that I really liked how that brightened it up. Okay. But you can see I've got a little more than a third of this done, and it really did not take very long at all. It took about 5-6 minutes maybe. This needs a little something out here. Let's do the blue. Leave that white. So you can go through and find those spots where you feel like, yeah, this didn't quite go as far as I'd like it to. And you can always go back, and the best part of colorless blenders, you could go back in and add that a few places again too. Even if it doesn't go all the way white, you can brighten up some of those or lighten some of those so you feel like that is interspersed throughout as well. With the colorless blender, remember that patience will serve you well, doing small amounts at a time, letting that move a little bit and coming back. It's going to work a lot better than trying to get all the way into that really light color all at once. All right, so I am pretty happy with what I have so far. So I've got 3 more little sections of our skein of yarn, and I think I will go ahead and speed that up, and then we'll think about background wise what we want to do with that, and we might even test that out on the practice one that I started last night. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to speed this up and work on the next 3 sections. So we've got all the colors laid down. I want to try two things. First of all, I do think I want to have a little bit of a background going, and I'm not totally sure yet what to do with that. But I'm also thinking it'd be really nice to get these areas where the yarn is tucking in on itself, to try to get a couple of those a little bit darker. So I'm wondering if I can use some deeper blue violets, my BB2s, my faves, and if one of those would work well on top of these. I'm thinking I'm going to need a BB23. So what I'm going to do is start with that one, because most of these colors, I don't know if you realize that, if you looked at all of the colors I use, they either end, I have a 3, a 4, and 2 5s that it's ending in that. So these are all right in that mid-tone range. So I think the BB23 is going to be the right one. And I think that's going to work really, really well, especially if I keep it right in at the center. So let's start with that. Keep this close. So I'll start at one end, and I don't need to do a whole lot of this. I really want to show, see how the yarn in this section gets really tight together? It's because it's coming in and overlapping itself. So I want to emphasize that it's tucking in away from the viewer. And I don't even need to do it on every section, I don't think. But I like it. I like the idea that it really, on these places where the yarn is really bumping into each other, like on this one, it's popping out at us more. I just don't feel like I need to tuck it as much. And you can kind of play with that about which ones do you feel like look like they're tucking back in. And I appreciate both pieces are tucking, so you might end up doing more. You can always go back and add more. I'm a big proponent of that. Start small and add from there. I am not going to do any coloring on top of this. So this is literally setting right on top of the color. So I am using kind of a flick stroke. If there was a spot that I felt like really stood out, I could do real lightly over the top of that with the color that I'm working on top of, but I'm thinking I'm not going to need to, or I'm hoping I'm not going to need to. Yeah, I think I'm going to do just a tiny bit on either side over here. And notice I'm not going all the way out to the edges either. I'm really keeping this more toward the center. Very purposeful on my part. Now I want to show you something. When you're testing out, now I could guess that my BB23 was going to be the color that I wanted, and I love how that pushes that in, because as much as I love the multicolor, I still want to show that it's this skein of yarn kind of looping in and out. But I want to show you real quick. I love having one of these to the side. This is what I did last night, because I thought I had colors that I liked, but I wasn't totally sure if they would work the way I had in my head, because they're different color families. They're bumping into each other. I wanted to make sure it worked well. So this was my test run, but it's nice to have it now, because if I'm not sure what color to do that shading with, that pushback with, I can try things out. What I was concerned about with like a BV20 is that if I went over the top of it, and it might work as well, what I'm going to end up with, because it ends in a 0, is that it might actually push, like lighten some of those colors. It's not going to push it back. Same thing if I go too dark. If I went too dark, it sits so on top of that. I would either have to blend that in and go through and literally hit those colors again, or it just looks like it's sitting on top. It doesn't look like it's part of it. Now, if I wanted to do the extreme and get it darker, I could have done that first and done a significantly darker, like a BB 25, and come in and done that first, and then do the colors, do my colors, my yarn colors on top of it, it's going to help. It'll hit that with alcohol one more time and it'll blend it in, but with it sitting underneath it, you're going to get that effect, and it'll be one notch darker than what I've ended up with the BB23. So I'm actually pretty thrilled with how this turned out. My next question is, do I want to do something on the exterior or do I want to fussy cut that out? I'm thinking I want to do exterior, like a color really light. And what I'm thinking is I'd really like to do something more of a complementary background versus similar tone. This is a very cool, we've got blue, blue violet, red violet, so it's all in that range. So we're looking at like one corner of the color wheel, working from blue toward the reds, not quite getting there, working through the violets and hitting that very little edge of the reds. And so then thinking about that, what sits on the opposite side of the color wheel? So directly across from blue is orange. Directly across from violet is yellow. So we're looking at warmer kind of yellow reds, yellows, and again, because I have this guy, I can test some of those out. So I could do kind of a lighter yellow, and that is way too dark. What was that I just grabbed? YR12, YR00. Actually, I don't mind that, crazy enough. And I could do something that was more not so solid. If I kept this pretty light and did some dots, big dots, not little dots, big dots. It might take a few minutes, but I'm kind of liking the look of that. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I've got a YR00, a YR12, and colorless blender. This is going to go on fast forward, guys, because this is going to take a minute, but this is what I am going to aim for. And I'm going to keep it backed out so you guys can, I don't fall off quite as often that way. And you guys can see most of what I'm doing. I'm sorry when I fall off the screen. All right, so basing with YR00, and then I'm going to do big dots with YR12 and colorless blender. So I've got it there. I think I'm just going to trim just inside those little lines so that I can pop this on a card front. I hope you learned a few things today about some easy ways to use Copics for some really effective, fun coloring. Stop by Ann Corbiere-Scott Designs and you can find this image and many more. She is designing new stuff all the time. And again, for those of you that are a little hesitant about working with digitals, this is an amazing place to start because of the way Ann has formatted these. So all you have to do is open them up and print them. So for a lot of us, that makes things a lot easier. Hey, everybody, have a great day. If you've got any questions, whether it's regarding this particular image or something else Copic related or teaching related, just give me a shout in the comments below. Stop by scrapweaver.com. I've got some big stuff coming up, so stay in tune there. And then have a happy, colorful day.